Your customer sends you their logo and it looks fine on the computer, but when you go to print, it's blurry. Why? Stick around and I'll answer that question and give you 7 other tips for the best DTF graphics. I'm sure you've heard the phrase garbage in, garbage out. This phrase is so applicable to DTF. It doesn't matter how dialed in your printer is, the clarity or the colors. If you try to print a graphic that's not optimized for DTF, your end result will suffer. Which brings us to tip number 1. 300 DPI, always. The default mode for images in Photoshop is 72 DPI, or dots per inch, or in the case of web graphics, pixels per inch. For any DTF print to look amazing, it has to be 300 DPI. So if you have an image that is going to be printed 10 inches wide, it needs to be at least 3,000 pixels wide. Otherwise, you end up with blurry, underwhelming prints. Tip number 2. Vary designs with open or negative space perform the best. This means you don't just have one solid block of ink, but it's broken up by some empty space where the shirt material is showing through, giving you a softer hand feel. You can achieve this with a color knockout or half-toning the image. Tip number 3. Darker garments like black will require more ink. To get those eye-popping colors, you have to use more white underbase because inks aren't completely opaque and darker shirt colors can dull your design. However, keep in mind that using more white underbase means the transfer will feel thicker. So if you're aiming for super bright colors on a black or dark garment, just know it will feel a little bit thicker. Tip number 4. Semi-transparent pixels don't work. With DTF, a printed pixel can't be partially transparent. It has to be either on or off, 0 or 100% a certain color. You can achieve a somewhat semi-transparent look using halftones, but be careful with designs that have drop shadows, flames, or glows that are going on darker colored shirts. Tip number 5. Vector files over raster, most of the time. Vector files are created using mathematical equations to define points, lines, and curves, resulting in a smooth and precise image. They can be scaled to any size without losing quality, meaning a small vector logo can be enlarged to the size of a billboard without becoming blurry or pixelated. On the other hand, raster files, such as JPEGs, are composed of pixels, which are tiny squares that make up an image. When the image is enlarged, the pixels are stretched, causing the image to become blurry or pixelated. This is especially noticeable when working with images that have fine details or text. While raster files can be useful for photographs and complex images, vector files are preferred for logos, icons, and other graphics that require precise lines and shapes. So, for the best quality and versatility, it's recommended to use vector files whenever possible. Tip number 6. PNGs or PDFs. Many apparel decorators prefer PNG, but these two file types have transparency information built in. If you were trying to print a circular logo and you made it a JPEG, everything outside of that circle is going to be white. With a PNG or PDF, everything outside of that circle is technically invisible, at least to the printer. Tip number 7, the garment matters. If you're printing on a next level dry fit t-shirt that is super lightweight, you're gonna need to be very careful as almost any graphic will feel somewhat plasticky. However, if you're printing on a heavy sweatshirt, you can get away with a thicker feel to the transfer. Tip number 8, the better your original file, the better your final output. We talked about this earlier, garbage in, garbage out. Make sure the file you're working with checks off as many of these best practices as possible for the best results. Looking for more creative inspiration and expert DTF tips? Subscribe to the channel and ring that bell so you're notified when our next DTF.com video is released. And head to DTF.com for industry news, products, shop profiles, and more tips to help you grow in the DTF space.